Welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast with your hosts, Joshua Poniatowski and Alex Taylor. Let's talk football.
Hello, and welcome to the Fantasy Syndicate Podcast. My name is Joshua Poniatowski, and I am riding solo today. Alex is on vacation, but I wanted to give you all a week one start and sit advice. I know we're about a week out now, but a lot of people have already drafted, making decisions for their lineups. And based on how this does, we might continue doing this. So if you want more content like this, please let us know in the comments or give us a like. While I am going to identify players that I would start and would not start in week one, it's obviously very situational. So please post your start sit questions in the comments, and we'll be happy to provide our thoughts. Also, if you want to see something different with the graphics that I'm about to show you, and as we're going through the different games, please let us know. I'm willing to make adjustments where I can. And overall, my logic for week one is normally to not get crazy. It is the start of the NFL season, and historically, the NFL offenses have underperformed because honestly, they just don't play much in the preseason. So listen to this data. In 2023, 14 of the 32 quarterbacks threw for less than 200 yards. Only 5 quarterbacks threw for over 250 yards. In 2024, it was even worse. 18 of the 32 quarterbacks threw for less than 200 yards, and only 8 quarterbacks threw over 250 yards. So essentially, in both years, kickers were the most active kind of scorers over passers because offenses just stalled so consistently. If you have a kicker in your league, week one, I would say make sure you got a good one because it'll probably be one of the most beneficial weeks for kickers for the entire year. But because of that, I want to stick to the more reliable players for fantasy and not take too many risks when we talk about taking shots on week one. So all right, let's jump into it. We're going to jump into the first week's game, which is the Cowboys at the Eagles. This is a Thursday night game. The over-under total for this game is 47 points. Dallas is expected to score right around 19.5 points, and Philly is the dominator in this game, and they're expected to score right around 27.5 points. Last year, the Eagles had one of, if not the best defense in the league. While I don't expect them to be as efficient this year, they still have a top 5 defense heading into the season. If you have been following, you know that I've been excited. Me and Alex have been excited about Dak, and really this entire offseason have been hyping the Dallas offense up. And for this first game, it'll honestly be trial by fire playing the Eagles. Even with the poor matchup for Dak, if you are streaming quarterbacks, while he isn't necessarily at the top of my list, he is definitely on my list. Dak, I would still start him in this game. CeeDee and George Pickens are obviously a must start. They should see a high volume opportunities, even if they don't see the red zone too much. Javonte Williams and Jake Ferguson, for me, are bench candidates this week. Javonte's situation is still a little murky. I'm not willing to bet my week one matchup on him. You probably also have better running backs to choose from than him because he's going late at ADP. I'm also benching Jake Ferguson. I do believe that he will find value, but I think there's better streaming options this week elsewhere. He will essentially be number 3 in the passing game on this offense and number 3 in the red zone, and facing a stout Eagles defense. I'm kind of going to bench Ferguson, and we're going to talk about some of the other tight end streamers that I might choose moving forward. Now, moving over to Philadelphia side, Hurts, Saquon, AJ Brown, and Devonta are literally all must starts. If Dallas can put up even somewhat of a fight early on in this game, they should all be able to find value. Dallas Goedert, for me, is a tight end streamer. I would honestly consider him this week, and I think he's one of the better ones too. If you are streaming the tight end, the other positions really should be stronger as your overall team. So you might not necessarily need a huge boom game out of your tight end. You just need somebody to keep you consistent and keep you in the fight to win week one. But Goedert is, when he's on the field, he's usually good for 4 receptions and 40 yards. He's not the most exciting tight end option, but he's someone who normally has between 5 to 9 points floor in half PPR scoring. And honestly, this being potentially a high scoring affair also makes his upside even better. So for me, Dallas Goedert falls in the start column as well as a optimal tight end streamer for many of you that faded tight ends during your drafts. All right, next up, we have the Chiefs versus the Chargers. The over-under total total for this game is 45.5 points. Kansas City is expected to score right around 23.5 points, and the Chargers are expected to score 20.5 points. Now, this is important. Do not get caught sleeping in week 1. This game is in São Paulo, Brazil on Friday night. The Chiefs were another unit that dominated in 2024, while Steve Spargalono should get most out of the talent in Kansas City. They did lose safety Justin Reed and a couple of D linemen, but honestly, their overall defensive unit should still be considered elite coming into this year. Last year, they kept 13 teams to 20 points or less. So, this defensive unit is mostly still intact, so they should still be dominant this year. The Chargers also, based on who you're talking to, should have a solid defensive unit. This game should be interesting because the Chargers are going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to control the game, control the clock, but I don't think they're going to be able to stick with that game script 100% with Kansas City's offense. I'm starting on the Chiefs side. I'm starting Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and absolutely Xavier Worthy, especially with the Rashid Rice suspension for 6 games. Kelce and Worthy should be number 1 and number 2 in an offense that throws on average 34 times a game. They should both be in for a heavy workload and honestly see plenty of opportunities, so I feel comfortable starting both of those guys. Pacheco is a little bit more interesting decision. Honestly, I am much higher on Pacheco than most people. I consider him, for this game, a low-end running back too. I think he's being faded and dropped way too far down draft boards, but I'm considering a starter this week and a running back too. I believe we'll see a bounce back this year from Pacheco. He's a featured back. He's in a high-powered offense, and honestly, it's hard not to draft a guy on a team who is going to score points. Even last year, Kareem Hunt found a way to be consistently right around the running back 2 range. So honestly, I have no doubt that a healthy Pacheco will be able to do that as well. So I'm starting Pacheco. Moving over to the Chargers, Justin Herbert this week is on my bench list. The Chargers have 2 viable running backs, and while they did upgrade their receiving room, I'm not willing yet to bet my week 1 matchup on him. He does have upside going into the season, but I'm not willing to bet that just yet. He is outside my top 12 quarterbacks for week 1. I'm not streaming him, and I'm not looking at him currently. Obviously, if you're in a super flex league, this is going to be very different. But in 1 QB, there's better options out there, which I'll share as we go through these different games. Lad Mcconkey is a must start for me. He'll be featured wide receiver in a game. And honestly, this should be a pass-centric game for the most part. Keenan Allen, Trey Harris, Will Dissly are all bench candidates. We have no idea how they're going to use these 3 just yet. And the risk, honestly, is just too high for me to consider these guys in my week 1 lineup. As far as Omarion Hampton goes, I'm plugging him in. I'm starting him. Most of you drafted him as a running back top 15 in your league, so he's probably your running back 2 going into the season. It is a little worrisome with him being a rookie, this being his first game. Najee's still hanging around, but I'm locked and loaded. I'm going with Omarion. I think he is behind an elite offensive line and maybe not have a huge pop-off game this year, especially with the Chiefs, or this week, especially with the Chiefs defense situation. But he's a guy that you drafted him high. You probably have to start him based on how many running backs you got. If you have better options in the flex position or maybe a better running back that we'll talk about later, consider it. But, you probably drafted him in a situation where you're going to have to start him. So roll with it. Go with your guy. Next up, we have the Raiders versus the Patriots. The over-under total for this game is 43 points. Las Vegas, the Raiders are projected to score a very low 20.5 points, and New England is also a very low 22.5 points. While this isn't the lowest game of the week, this is one of them as far as from a point scoring total. This game honestly comes with a lot of question marks. We have quite literally an entire new Raiders team and coaching staff. On the other side, we have Drake Maye with his real first, I would say, wide receiver 1 weapon, Stephon Diggs, and all the rushing upside that Drake Maye comes with. The Raiders had one of the worst defenses in the entire league last season, and they also passed the ball at one of the highest rates. This should probably continue in 2025. They have not made a significant improvement on the defensive side of the ball. They have one of, if not the worst secondaries in the league still. They have a bad D-line unit, and linebacker unit as a whole. Obviously, Max Crosby is, and there are some other studs on their team, but as an overall unit, they're just not good based on the information, the players that we currently have. So you can expect, for the most part, that they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. They're going to have to throw, and they're probably going to get burnt a lot, on both ends of the ball when passing and rushing. So they should probably be an optimal matchup for a lot of teams moving forward. For me, though, Geno Smith, Jakobi Meyers, Donte, Thornton Jr. are all bench candidates. You could make a case for Geno as a streamer this week, but for me, I still need to see what's going to happen with this offense. It just seems a little bit too risky to me, especially in 1 QB leagues when I think there are better options available. But again, you take your guys, go with your gut, but I'm not starting Geno this week. Ashton, Jeanty, and Brock Bowers are obvious must starts. If you're not starting your, potentially first to third round picks, then you picked wrong in the draft, okay? So you got to start these guys. On the Patriots side of the ball, though, I am benching Drake Maye, Rhamondre Stevenson, Bouye, and Hunter Henry. It comes down to just being better options, and again, the big question marks that kind of surround this team. Now, Travion Henderson is interesting. Again, he comes with a question mark, being a rookie, first game out the gate, but I'm willing to take that bet this week, even if it's week 1. The Raiders defense is probably one of the worst that they're going to face this year. And even though he's a rookie, his receiving upside on top of him seeing early down opportunities is just enough for me to consider him a running back 2/flex option going into this week. I'm also putting Stephon Diggs in my start category because, again, the Raiders defense and the secondary, I believe Diggs is being undervalued. As long as he's healthy, he's on the field, he should benefit really from mostly the bad Raiders secondary. He should be the number 1 target on this offense and essentially number 1 red zone threat for this team. Him and Drake Maye should connect all year. He comes in as a low wide receiver 2 flex play for me, but he's a guy that also I would be plugging into my lineups if I needed him as a starter. All right, next up, we have the Steelers versus the Jets. The over-under total for this game, if you can believe it, is 38 points. Pittsburgh is projected to score 20.5 points. The Jets are expected to score 17. This is the projected lowest scoring game of the week, which honestly doesn't typically bode well for most fantasy assets. The Jets, they have a stout linebacker core and secondary, and the Steelers have one of the best defensive lines coming into 2025. These two teams honestly do a good job of offsetting each other and their offensive strengths. For the Steelers, I am benching literally everybody except DK Metcalf. He should be the main target in this offense and see enough production and opportunities to be a fantasy asset. Outside that, we have the potential of a split backfield, a Rodgers who is touchdown dependent, throwing the ball. And with the projected point total being as low as it is, that's not very optimistic. If I had to choose a running back to start this week in my lineup, though, I know some of you may be faded running back. So if I had to choose one of the 2 running backs between Jalen Warren or Caleb Johnson, I'm taking Jalen Warren every time in this week 1 matchup. I am not a Caleb Johnson guy. I think Warren is just more experienced. He's better. He's more explosive. He's a better pass catcher. He's a better blocker. I just feel like overall he's just a better football player. So I'd go with Warren in this week 1 game. We still got to see what happens from Johnson. But if you had to choose somebody, that's who I'm going with. But if you have the option, I'm benching both of these guys. For the Jets, you could potentially argue that Justin Fields is a streaming option in week 1. And honestly, you wouldn't be wrong just simply because his scramble ability, his huge rushing upside. But it is a risky play to start him. The smart play, though, is to bench him if you have other options. Even though he averages QB6 as a starter, he is now in a new offense. We predict a very low-scoring game, and the Steelers' defensive line, again, is off the charts good. So I'm not risking my week win on a risky Fields in my lineup. As we go through some of these other games, I will talk about better streaming quarterback options. I know there has been a lot of talk about Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. This has been a hot topic all offseason with potentially them splitting opportunities or Breece getting traded. But it literally hasn't happened yet. Breece is incredibly talented and should be considered a running back 2 in week 1. I'm starting him. He still has his pass catching upside and should be the main running back 1 as far as opportunities. I'm really not worried about him until I actually see something change in a real game. So I'm rolling with him as my running back 2 slot. If you got Breece, I'm plugging him in. You should too. Garrett Wilson for me is also a start. Just like DK, he should be the main target for a passing passing attack game or main target in the passing attack. Fields curbs his upside, which is why we saw him drop so far in his ADP, but it's not enough to bench that man. Plug Wilson into your lineup if you have him. As far as the other Jets players go, they're all on my bench. Mason Taylor might end up being the number one receiving threat here in this offense. But again, you got Justin Fields throwing the ball. I'm not putting in a rookie tight end in my lineup in week 1 who is potentially supposed to be on a bad offense and a low point scoring game. So I'm just not doing it. If you have him, put him on your bench, hold him. I know he has some upside moving forward as potentially that number 2 weapon, but I'm not starting him in week 1. All right, next up, we have the Bucs versus the Falcons. The over-under total for this game is 46.5. Tampa Bay is projected to score 23.5 points. Atlanta is expected to score 22.5 points. Both of these offenses are supposed to be electric this year. I'm not personally sold on Michael Penix Jr. yet, but I'm not going to go into that. That's just for another day. To start sit advice. Baker Mayfield, Bucky Irving, and Mike Evans are all locked in starts for me. No questions asked. I'm starting these 3 without question into my lineup if I drafted them. Cade Otton is a bench candidate until, honestly, the Bucs lose more wide receivers. Sorry, Bucs, your offseason's been rough. Or we see him get involved in the game plan. Until either of these things actually happen, he's staying on my bench or really waivers based on how deep your league is or shallow. Rachaad White is another guy who stays on the bench for me until we see how they actually use him. He might have some small value in PPR, but again, with the new OC in town, we don't know what's going to happen in that running back situation from Rachaad White situation. Bucky obviously is the lead back, and we saw how explosive he was. Rachaad White, though, is riding the pine. Now, for Emeka Mbuka, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. With him being essentially the wide receiver 2, he's in a high-powered offense. I see an immediate role for him in week 1, and I would feel comfortable starting him. I know he's fallen a little bit later in drafts, but he's wide receiver 2 on this team. I consider him a wide receiver 2/flex play, and he probably has one of the higher upsides for a wide receiver 2 than most other receivers in this range, simply because of this high-powered offense that we expect with Baker coming into the year. As for the Falcons, I am benching Michael Penix Jr. I'm benching Darnell Mooney. Should he not be hurt, I expect him to be hurt. So let's talk about Raymond McLeod. He's also getting benched in that slot. So if Mooney is healthy, though, he becomes an interesting flex candidate, but I don't think he'll be fully recovered. So I wouldn't risk it even if he was considered healthy to start week 1. I don't expect that to happen, but you never know. We're still a week out, and he did show up to practice recently. Obviously, I'm starting Bijan Robinson and Drake London. I don't need to go too much into those 2. Start your studs week 1. Now, this is going to sound a little bit crazy. So I've talked about everybody on the Falcons, but I have not talked about Kyle Pitts Jr. For those of you that know and have been listening, I have been bashing Kyle Pitts for the past 2 years. I've been telling everybody to fade him. I've been super low on this guy, but if Darnell Mooney is out, he essentially jumps into the number 3 role from an offensive standpoint on their production side for the Falcons. He becomes the number 2 receiving option, only behind Drake London. Michael Penix is a pass-heavy quarterback. So if Darnell Mooney is out, I am potentially streaming Kyle Pitts Jr. in week 1 simply because I expect this to be a high-scoring game. I expect both teams to be passing the ball significantly, and he has the potential to explode, right? He has the potential to go off, potentially end up as tight end 1 through 3 for the week. And if you need a streaming tight end, he's probably on waivers. He's probably available. This is a much riskier play than, some of these other tight end streamers I'm going to talk about. Penix is on my start list for week 1 as a streaming tight end option. Now, next we have the Dolphins versus the Colts. The over-under total for this game is 46.5. The Dolphins are projected to score 23.5 points. The Colts are also, Indy are around 23.5 points. The Dolphins are back in 2025, right? Right. They're back. Everyone keeps forgetting about the 2023 season where Tua finishes top 10 quarterback. Tyreek Hill, number 2 wide receiver. Jalen Waddle was the top 35 guy. And Devon Achane was sneaky at the back end of last season. If Tua is healthy, all the other pieces are also considered to be healthy in there, then why would we not expect a solid offensive performance out of this team? The Colts just brought in a new defensive coordinator, Lou Aramuno, who honestly was with the Bengals the past 6 years, and he only finished in the top half on the defensive side of the ball, top half of the league once in those 6 seasons. So, and the data shows when you get a new OC or defensive coordinator or really a head coach, it does have an impact on performance. So while Indy honestly does have more talent than the Bengals do on the defensive side of the ball, it's still early in the season. The Dolphins should have all their weapons, and the Colts are in that new DC coordinator situation. So I'm not too worried about that from a defensive standpoint. Now, let's talk about the start and sit players. Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill fall into an automatic start territory for me if they are healthy. Now, Achane is dealing with a calf injury. Now, they're talking about him being ready for week 1, but he might miss week 1. And if this happens, you really need to pay attention to this. Jalen Wright is already injured. He's not playing in week 1. So this means if Achane can't go, Jalen Wright can't go, literally the rookie Ollie Gordon is going to get the nod in week 1 and be the running back 1 in what we expect to be a high-powered offense. Ollie needs to be rostered in all leagues. We haven't drafted yet for my league. I will be drafting him with a late pick simply because he's a week 1 starter if Achane can't go. So keep an eye on that. For those of you got Achane, make sure you roster Ollie. If he's available, go pick him up right now. Now, moving on to Jalen Waddle. He's at the very end of a wide receiver 2 flex range for me in this start category. Again, I would be starting Waddle if I needed to. I believe he's been undervalued coming into this year. Obviously, last year was not a great campaign for him, but I expect him with a fully healthy Miami team to at least start the year productive. I refuse to believe, we talk about Darren Waller now, that he will ever be a start candidate on my list, so I'm keeping him on waivers forever. I doubt this will change, but you never know. But Darren Waller is not even on my radar for someone to have even considering starting in an offense who is option number 4, essentially. As far as Tua goes, he's another QB streaming option for me I'm looking at this week. If his entire team is healthy, which we project it to be, even if the offensive line is terrible, which I know you're probably thinking, well, the offensive line is terrible. Yes, I get it. He's accurate. He's highly efficient when he's on the field. And when he can get his guys the ball, they make plays in open space. You're talking about some of the most electric wide receivers as well as running backs in open space and, making plays after catch. So I'm starting Tua if I need a streaming quarterback for this week. For the Colts, I am benching, this might be a shock, benching everyone except Jonathan Taylor. I am inclined to let the dice roll on Tyler Warren if you feel like you need a tight end option, but we still don't know how this offense will look. Josh Downs is a great slot wide receiver. This also curbs Warren's upside from that pass catching ability. I'm just not quite there yet on Tyler Warren until we see what happens in week 1. Daniel Jones is absolutely an upgrade over Anthony Richardson for literally every pass catcher on this team, but we need to know who is the alpha, right? The order should go Michael Penix Jr. and Josh Downs based on the history we've seen, but we don't know who Jim Cooter, yes, that's the offensive coordinator, Jim Cooter, is going to line up to be the guy and scheme targets to. I wouldn't want to lose week 1 because we see a spread love offense with questionable quarterback play from Daniel Jones. Again, I'm benching everyone except Jonathan Taylor for the Colts. If you didn't have any other tight end options, even though I spoke about some streamers that I would absolutely play over Warren, then plug Warren in, cross your fingers. And if you had to choose between Pittman and Downs, I'm taking Pittman. He had been their main alpha guy. Last year it was spread, but he potentially should be the main guy that they're looking for. All right. Moving into the next game, we have the Cardinals versus the Saints. The Saints are coming into the game looking like the worst team in the entire NFL. Everyone in Vegas thinks so, and everyone who has eyes probably thinks the same, except me, okay? This is the shocking thing. Personally, I feel like the major pieces that the offensive side of the ball seem to be missing for this team, is just the quarterback. Everything else, they have a middle of the tier offensive line. They got running back. They have 2 young running backs. They have Chris Olave. They have Rashid. They just traded for Devon Vele. They have the pieces around them offensively, but they don't have a quarterback. But with all that being said, the over-under total for this game is 42.5 points. The Cardinals are expected to score right around 23.5 points, and New Orleans has another low point total with 17.5 projected total points. The Cardinals, during the offseason, they made some adjustments to some of their pieces, but offense is pretty much still mostly intact from last year. I believe we honestly should be going into this game with the same look and outlook that we did in 2025, but with the hope that Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. have a better rapport, better connection, and Marvin Harrison Jr. put on about 20 pounds to hopefully help with those big body catches. Harrison Jr. was the highest in non-catchable targets last year as wide receivers, which is insane. For me, I am starting James Conner, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride. I'm benching Michael Wilson. James Conner should absolutely feast in this game. This is his first game back. I'm confidently plugging into my lineup. I think he has a running back one role this week if necessary for your team. The Saints have the worst defensive line in the game, and I believe he's just being crazily undervalued for running back and where he's going and how consistent he's been as a 3-down back, both pass catcher and lead back from rushing opportunities. For many, Kyler Murray is a cut and dry top 10 quarterback this week, but honestly, I'm not so sure. Right now, he's just outside my top 10 quarterbacks for week 1. So I'm leaving this up to you. But for me, guys like Goff, Purdy, Prescott, Jordan Love are getting the nod over him in week 1 lineup. Again, he is a starting quarterback in week 1. Because you drafted him probably as your starter, you are going to be playing him, and he's playing the Saints. But I just feel like there's some better matchups and some better guys out there. Either way, if you wanted to start Kyler, I wouldn't fault you. For the Saints, I'm benching Spencer Rattler, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Juwan Jennings, Devon Vele. I'm benching all those guys. Now, let's talk about Alvin Kamara. Even though Kellen Moore, who's the new head coach for the Saints, is a running back efficiency killer when it comes to passing game. He's everywhere Kellen Moore has gone, he's killed running back's efficiency in the past game. I'm still starting him. Still starting Kamara. He should, again, feast in the passing attack. He should be their feature back. The Saints are probably going to be playing from behind a lot, so why would they not getting their running back one involved all game who's on a nice contract? Now, Chris Olave, another guy who I feel like is being undervalued. I am unfortunately benching him for this week. Even though I believe he's going to be grossly undervalued overall in the season, Spencer Rattler currently is throwing him the ball. He is essentially Anthony Richardson. He throws maybe Olave's way consistently, right? He's going to be the number one guy, but we got Kamara taking targets as well. I think Olave could probably squeak out a 10-point performance in half PPR, but where you drafted him at ADP this week, you probably don't need to force him into your lineup. So I'm just not plugging him just yet. All right, moving into the next game, we have the Giants versus the Commanders. The over-under total for this game is 45 points. New York Giants are projected to score right around 19.5 points. Washington is also right around 25.5 points. So as you can see, Washington is greatly favored. They should dominate in this game. I believe, though, that the Giants have upgraded their quarterback room substantially. Well, it doesn't look pretty. It's way better than the past 3 years at depth, at talent, at excitement, and honestly, future potential with Dart being there. With all that said, again, Washington should dominate from top to bottom for this game. Russell Wilson, Wan'Dale Robinson, Theo Johnson are all bench candidates for me. Now let's talk about Tyrone Tracy Jr., who on the other hand makes his way into actual start territory for me. I think Tracy is another guy being undervalued in year 2, who is basically a wide receiver. Many of you maybe do know this or don't know this, but he was a wide receiver up to his very last year in college. He had 1 year running back experience. He came into the NFL, showed that he could be a running back, but he came from that wide receiver background. So he's only played essentially 3 years at the running back position. Now, the Giants should have an upgraded quarterback. He has a pass-catching running back, right? He's their main guy when it comes to catching passes out of the backfield, and we know Washington should dominate. So when we talk about passing the ball, passing the rock, having upside as a running back, I think from a all-purpose yard standpoint, this is why I'm starting Tyrone Tracy, especially in PPR formats. If you faded running backs especially, and you need a guy to plug in, it is a little bit riskier, but I look at him as kind of a running back 2 with a flex consideration option based on your situation. Malik Neighbors, start, target machine, enough said. For the Commanders, I am starting Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin. That's who I'm starting. That's the list. We don't know what will happen in the backfield, even though Eckler seems like the main guy. Debo is going to be in a new team on a new fit. And honestly, Zach Ertz is now the third, maybe fourth option in this offense that already doesn't pass the ball a whole lot. That's my rationale between benching all those folks. As far as running back goes, again, if you faded running back, I know your mind and the hype is probably telling you to start Bill, but I'm starting Austin Eckler if I had to. If I absolutely had to and had no other options at running back, Eckler is a guy. He should get the nod. He should essentially be running back one. He also gets those pass catching targets on the team, and I'm benching them both if I have the option, but if not, Eckler's the guy I'm going with of the two. All right, next up, we have the Panthers versus the Jaguars. The over-under point total for this game is 46 points, which I was honestly a little bit surprised as I was looking at this. Carolina is projected to score 21.5 points. Jacksonville is projected right around 23.5 points. Again, those are over-unders that I'm sharing. The NFL sure did a good job at picking week one matchups to get people excited. There's a bunch of good matchups. Actually, the last couple that I talk about here, I feel like are bangers. But when we talk about the potential of quarterbacks, right? The excitement of the new year, the Panthers, the Jaguars, they fit that mold. And what is expected to be, honestly, a good game. We have offensive guru Liam Cohen. We have a new, exciting Travis Hunter, who, we'll talk about starter sit on here in a moment. We have the potential of Bryce Young finishing strong in 2024, a new Trevor Lawrence healthy in a new offense. So it's just an exciting game overall. I feel like this game might be watched a little bit more than some of the others, simply because all of the uncertainty as well as excitement that's going around this game. And when we think about Panthers versus Jags, we don't necessarily always think about excitement. So it's cool that week one they have these two playing, especially with that upside that we're looking at for both these guys. For Carolina, though, I'm going to jump into it, and I'm going to start Ted McMillan he's their main guy. This is essentially Bryce Young's main target. We saw him coming strong in 2024. I even actually started him in my final week matchup for the season, which led to a win, but it's a new year. So I'm planning on waiting to see the mentality, seeing what happens with Bryce Young. The Jaguars also have one of the best linebacker cores in the league and newly buffed up secondary for Bryce. So he has a lot to overcome in this week one matchup. So I'm benching Bryce Young, but I'm starting Ted McMillan. He should be the main guy focused in this offense. I like Chuba Hubbard. I honestly like him a whole lot, and I have been burned fading this man in the past, but I'm very worried about Rico Dowdle. Very worried about him taking touches. Rico is significantly a better pass catcher than Chuba. Dave Canales wants to establish the run, and now he has two very capable guys to do it. So I'm worried that we might see this come out in week one, and if you start Chuba, you could get burned. If you have other running back options, I'm starting them, but I foresee, honestly, like a 60-40 split, which isn't that terrible, but it's not great for a guy who you envision as a running back one on their team, and especially if they're going to be playing from behind or losing games, as we've seen the Panthers do. Rico will probably be on the field more consistently as that pass catching option. So I'm just a little worried there, especially in this week one matchup. So if you have the option, bench Chuba, bench Rico, and see how it plays out. For the Jags, I am starting Brian Thomas Jr., and that is my list. Trevor Lawrence should immediately benefit from the Liam Cohen offense. So if you started him as a streamer, get it. But the running back room is murky. Travis Hunter defense playing time, we don't know what's going to happen. Brenton Strange, we'll see an increase in targets as the lone tight end option, but there's just too many mouths to feed for me to feel confident putting in my lineup. It will most than likely be the Brian Thomas Jr. show. They will probably scheme targets to Hunter to get him involved, and we might see a running back by committee approach with Tank taking early down snaps, Travis Etienne taking those third down opportunities. So until we see what Cohen is going to roll out, he's, again, not necessarily, these guys aren't ones I'm feeling comfortable starting outside Brian Thomas Jr. Many of you drafted Travis Hunter probably as wide receiver 30 range, so you might be forced to start him in the flex or second, wide receiver 2. But again, if you have other options, I'm going there until we figure out what this role looks like for Travis Hunter moving. All right, the next game, we have Bengals versus the Browns. I am literally just going to jump into this one. The over-under for this point total is 47.5. Cincinnati is expected to score, again, this over-under, 26.5 points. Cleveland is right around 20.5 points as far as expected points. Everyone in their mother is starting Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins. So I feel like I don't need to talk about these guys. You're starting them. You drafted them all within probably the first 3 rounds based on where T ended up going. And same with Burrow. Oh, okay, I guess we'll be 5 in one QB with Burrow. But still, you drafted these guys high. You drafted them as pretty much your main guys, most of you, based on where you drafted them. So start your studs in week 1, especially where you drafted them. Mike Gesicki, though, for me, is a bench candidate until T. Higgins gets hurt, which is inevitable, honestly. Mike Gesicki is a bench. He's option 4 in this offense, and they always focus their studs, so I'm not even considering starting him as a tight end or a streamer, even though the Bengals should blow out the Browns. For the Browns, I am starting Jerry Jeudy as a low-end wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3 flex play, simply because of sheer volume and needing to keep up with the Bengals. And David Njoku, I view him as a top 5 tight end this week for the same exact reason. He is potentially the main receiving weapon. These two are going to be the main guys on the offense. Outside of those two, I'm not risking week 1. So I'm benching Joe Flacco. I'm benching Jerome Ford, Dylan Sampson. I'm benching Cedric Tillman. But Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku for week 1, these are my guys. These are starters. Again, if you have other options than Jeudy, sure, take a look, but he is in my start category. And David Njoku is a top 5 tight end for me this week, simply because of sheer volume that you should see to keeping up with the Bengals and being the main priority and that connection he already has with Joe Flacco. All right, next up, we have the Titans versus the Broncos. The over-under total is 42 points. Tennessee is coming in with a gross 16.5 point total projection. Denver is sitting at 24.5 points as far as the projected total. The Titans have a fresh new face at QB with Cam Ward under second-year head coach Brian Callahan. The Broncos buffed up their offensive line. They added weapons at running back, at tight end. Sean Payton has made leaps and bounds on the offensive side of the ball, moving from 32nd in the league when he took over to 20th in the league to 12th last year. So I expect this trend to continue on the offensive side of the ball. But the defensive side of the ball is scary. The Broncos are one of the best in the entire league as a whole. They're just going to be a scary team to face literally all year round if they can stay healthy. Because of that, I am benching Cam Ward, Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, and yes, I'm even benching Calvin Ridley. I love Ridley this year, but week 1 is very, very spooky, and let me explain why. So Ridley will be shadowed by Patrick Surtain. In 2024, Surtain was targeted a league-low 11% of the time when he was in the game and shadowing those wide receivers. We're talking about 52 targets in all of 2024. Teams just do not throw to their main guy, which I expect them to scheme around this again for this upcoming year. Cam Ward is a rookie quarterback. They're not trying to make it harder than it has to be in week 1. So I extremely expect that Callahan is going to utilize Tony Pollard. So talking about Tony Pollard, he is a smash start for me. Tajay Spears is injured. Tony Pollard has on average over 100 yards a game last year when Tajay Spears was out. Ridley should also be a non-factor because of that defense and because of that shadow from Patrick Surtain. So Tony Pollard is probably going to be their main weapon this week and a guy that they're going to be scheming and looking to get involved. He's a no-brainer start for me. For the Broncos, I am starting Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton confidently. Evan Ingram is still a start candidate for me, but it isn't as cut and dry as some of the other guys. We know Peyton plans to use Ingram as his Joker role, but this is his first game with the team. He's against a Titans team that honestly should get dominated on the ground. So I don't expect a whole lot of passing from this game. I just think Evan Ingram's upside is curbed a little bit simply because the game script will probably dictate the Broncos will control the clock. They'll run a lot and they'll maintain the total points and win confidently. Now, RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins should see plenty of work, but we do not know what that's going to look like yet. Reports are that JK is getting the nod. So if I had to pick one of the two, I'm picking JK to start week 1 because he should have the early and often down back. With that said, though, if I had the option, I would bench both of them. Marvin Mims, Franklin, Brian, any other wide receiver that's in that back room or conversation, I'm also benching. Thinking about this team, Denver offense, what's going to come out of this game, Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton are the 2 guys I'm starting. And if I have an option, I'm benching both running backs. But if I had to choose, I'm choosing J.K. Dobbins for week 1. All right, next up, we have the 49ers versus the Seahawks. The Niners are going to come out in week 1 and just smash the Seahawks. I'm a Niners fan, so I'm a little biased here, but there is still a lot of unknown about Juwan Jennings. So when I give my start and sit advice right now at this moment, I'm giving it based off of him potentially not being there in week 1. I'm looking at Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Pearsall, and George Kittle are all starters. So Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Ricky Pearsall, and George Kittle are absolutely all starters for me. For the Seahawks, I am starting Jackson Smith-Njigba and Kenneth Walker if he is healthy. If he is injured or out for any reason, obviously Charbonnet becomes a must start. I hear people talking about Charbonnet eating into Kenneth Walker's carries and opportunities, but I just don't understand it because Kenneth Walker is just so good. If you've seen him play football, he is beyond talented. If he's healthy, he's substantially better than Sharps. So I am just not worried. If Walker's healthy, he's getting a nod. He's getting the main looks. He's getting the main opportunities. So I'm starting based on who is healthy for the game. As far as Sam Darnold goes, do we know if he was a product of the Kevin O'Connell offense? I guess we're going to find out in week 1. But to start the season, I'm not starting this man. I'm also benching Cooper Kupp and Torrey Holt until we see what comes of this offense. But these are both players I'm monitoring very closely. Kupp fell off last year, obviously because of a little bit of age, but I think it had more so to do with the McVay scheme and how they were scheming him targets. So I'm keeping an eye on Kupp this year as a sleeper, and Torrey Holt getting the nod as a rookie is also a great opportunity in this offense based on how they utilize him. So I'm keeping an eye on both of these guys as the season progresses, but I'm not starting them in week 1. Next, we have the Lions versus Packers. The over-under total for this game is 47 points. We're looking at a shootout for this one. Detroit is expected. The over-under is 23.5. Green Bay's over-under is 24.5. The last 4 games that I'm about to go over, including this one, are going to be bangers. This one specifically, though, is where when we think about sluggish offenses is in week 1, they jumped in and started 2 powerhouses to face off. Even though the Lions lost Ben Johnson, they hired John Morton, who was on the team in 2022 and the pass game coordinator for the last 2 seasons with the Broncos. Where they got better on offense every year, was that only Sean Payton, or did this guy learn a thing or two from one of the great offensive minds? I think we're still going to see a high-powered Lions offense. Green Bay just traded for Micah Parsons, who honestly should wreak havoc on Detroit. Detroit did just lose 2 of their key offensive line pieces during the offseason, so they aren't as elite of a unit on the offensive line as they were, but they are still solid. They shouldn't be considered anything outside of the top 50. As far as offensive lines, I'm thinking more middle of the pack versus top 5, but Detroit's defense is considered one of the best in the league when healthy. I say this does curb some upside for the Packers, but they're going to have to find a way to keep up. Again, we expect a shootout out of this game. So I am starting Jared Goff, who is added towards the top of my list as a streaming option. I'm starting Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jameson Williams. The only 2 guys that I'm benching from this offense is Monty, David Montgomery, and Tesla. Many of you spent a top 20 running back to top 25 running back pick on Monty, so this is probably hard to hear, but I have a sneaky suspicion in year 3 we see more of a roll out of Gibbs. We have a new OC, so the offense should look slightly different from how they utilize their back. Gibbs is just clearly the best back. He's more explosive. He's a better pass catcher, and if you were a coach, who would you want on the field? So I'm just a little bit worried about Monty there. Until I see the Lions support 2 top 20 running backs again in 2025, 2025. Monty's on my bench for the time being, if I can help it. If not, if you don't have an option, plug him in. Pray that they split the backfield again like they did last year, and Monty should get a lot of those red zone opportunities. But again, it's a risky play, I feel like, in week one. Even with this high-powered game that we expect, I'm just, worried about what that backfield will look like moving into the future year without a Ben Johnson offense. Sam Laporta is also a start candidate. With that said, his upside is now, I feel like, even more capped because Tesla, who's the rookie, found his way into the lineup, and he did look electric in preseason. I know you say don't put too much weight on preseason, but the fact that this guy is now essentially in that lineup and that third wide receiver, it's just tough from Laporta's standpoint. He is an elite tight end on all facets. It's just the talent around him is tough because they're not going to need him as much. They'll still utilize him in the red zone just like they did the past 2 years, but he's just in the open field is, if you got Gibbs, Monty, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, J-Mo, and now this rookie Tesla, are you considering him in the open field as consistently? For me, the answer is no. We saw it last year. He saw a drop of 40 opportunities in the open field because J-Mo was healthy. There is some curbed upside to Laporta. He's still a starter, though. He's still a top, maybe 6 to 8 tight end this week. So, you're plugging him into your lineup, absolutely. Moving over to the Packers, Jordan Love is also a streaming option for me. And he is an undervalued quarterback that I love this year. Yeah, that there is a pun intended on it, intentionally. I know y'all are dying laughing right now. But the Detroit defense is amazing. So I could see you going another direction. But if you need a guy to try to keep it close in week one, they're going to need to pass the ball. Again, we expect a high-scoring game from this. Josh Jacobs is a absolutely must start. He is another running back that I feel like has been falling a little bit too far in drafts. Matthew Golden, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed are all bench candidates until we see what happens in that room. Many of us learned this the hard way in 2024, where we didn't know who was the guy and who was the alpha that week. And we still don't. We really don't know who's going to be that person in 2024. So I'm not risking my week one on starting one of those guys at the hopes that they end up being the guy and hitting on week one. So I'm not risking that. Now, talking about Tucker Kraft, he is also being added to my tight end streamer shortlist as a starter. He should see enough opportunities to be a viable starter at the tight end position. He is their most efficient red zone weapon through the air coming into 2025. So plug him in if you need a tight end. I think we'll see enough opportunities. And last year, as far as routes run were concerned, he was their number one guy at routes run, and he was, I think, number 2 with targets. So he is a focal point in that offense, established from last year. And as a tight end, that's what we like to see. We like to see opportunities, and he's on the field and he gets opportunities. So this is why I'm plugging him in week one if I need a tight end. All right. Next up, we have the Texans versus the Rams. The Texans have a very, very good defensive line and secondary. They could be considered one of the top defensive units coming into 2025, which you're probably thinking like, Josh, you're absolutely crazy. But again, I feel like they have a great unit on those two sides of the ball. The Rams, however, entire defense relies on their pass rush. They're very different. They produced last year 4th best pressure rate in the NFL. The Texans' offensive line, I'm sure many of you know, is an absolute shambles compared to last year. Last year, I thought they were bad. CJ Stroud had the one of the top 5 sack rates in the NFL in 2024. Maybe it was number 1 as I'm running through the data in my head. They didn't have a great offensive line, and the Texans went out and they traded their essential best offensive guard, Laremy Tunsil. They also got rid of another offensive linemen, and they really haven't done much. They probably have the worst offensive line in the entire NFL. And for this reason, I am benching CJ Stroud. He has a bad offensive line. The Rams have an elite pass rush. So this doesn't make for a great combination for a QB who also saw a league high sack rate in 2024. So I'm benching CJ Stroud. What I will say, though, is I'm keeping an eye on Stroud. I think they're going to have a huge passing attack moving forward simply because the running back room is in shambles and they added passing weapons. So expect that for 2025. But for this week, I'm benching him. Nick Chubb, Pierce, Woody, or whoever else is in that backfield is just too risky for me to start in week one. I do like adding Chubb off waivers though. Last year, the one lesson that we learned was that when you have a good running back who goes to a better team, even though their offensive line is terrible, I would consider Texans a better team, that he ends up becoming a candidate to start. We saw it all year last year with good running backs going to better teams. So for me, he's worth a stash. And if you are desperate in week one at running back, he's also a sneaky start. Now, as far as the wide receivers go, Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk, Dalton Schultz, tight end are all bench players, bench candidates for me. The only starter in this mix should be Nico Collins. He should be the focal point of this offense with Mixon out. He should see even more opportunities now. We're about to see the opposite of 2024. With Joe Mixon injury and last year, them losing all of the wide receiver weapons throughout the year, they had to lean on Mixon. Well, now Mixon's out for 4 weeks. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. They really, have a hodgepodge of running back weapons. So now we're looking at a more pass-heavy attack moving forward. But for week one, especially with the Rams' defensive line and their pass rushing attack, I'm just not considering those options outside Nico Collins. For the Rams, I am starting Kyren Williams confidently. I don't understand how this guy continues to be faded in drafts this year, and people continue to undervalue him. But Kyron's going to get fed the rock. Puka is also a start. Devonta Adams is also a start. The only thing I'm worried about Kyren Williams is I feel like he's going to lose some red zone opportunities to Devonta because Devonta is an elite red zone guy. But he's a must start in week one. So I'm starting Kyren Williams, Puka Nacua, Devonta Adams. All of these must start. Matthew Stafford for me and Tyler Higbee. They're going to stay on my bench right now. You could argue Matthew Stafford, maybe streamer. You could also say bench him, keep him as a candidate because he now has 2 elite wide receiver weapons. But for week one, I'm not starting the guy. And I'm leaving him on my bench if I am, thinking about that future outlook for Matthew Stafford. All right, moving into a absolute banger of a game. We have the Ravens versus the Bills. In the highest scoring game of the week, we get the AFC division playoff rematch in week one. The Ravens have arguably the best secondary in the entire NFL and just an overall good defensive unit. The Bills' defensive line is also fantastic, and as a whole unit, they're great coming into 2025. So I feel like both these guys have great defenses, and we know they have amazing offenses. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Mark Andrews are all must-starts for me. Andrews should see an increased role with Likely out, and we project a shootout with these two good defenses. Zay Flowers is also a start for me, but you should look at him, how you drafted him. Zay went around the wide receiver 3 range, kind of wide receiver 30 as that pick. This is how I consider him. Last year, Ravens threw for around 4,100 yards. He had 40 plus touchdowns, and Zay still didn't break into the wide receiver 20 column or even 25. I think he was right around that range in half PPR. So he has essentially I'd say low floor, but very low ceiling as well. Rashad Bateman and D-Hop are bench players for me. Bateman does get red zone opportunities, so in this high scoring affair, he might find value. But for right now, I'm benching him at this point. I'm not starting Bateman. You got to have better options based on how your team is. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd be choosing Bateman. Moving over to the Bills, Josh Allen and James Cook are really the only true starters on the Bills for me right now. Khalil Shakur is also sneaking into my list as a wide receiver 3 flex option as a starter if you are desperate. In games that Buffalo lost, he averaged 71 receiving yards last year. This was because they were forced to pass the ball. This should be a shootout by all accounts, which really does bode well for the Yak Monster. You need to keep an eye on Shakur because he's got that ankle injury that they said he'll be ready. But of these pass catchers for the Bills, when we talk about Shakur, Josh Palmer, Keon Coleman, Dalton Kincaid, he would be the one if I had to start somebody that I'd be looking to start simply because I believe he's the most talented. He has the most upside. He does not have a whole lot of touchdown upside. That is absolutely capped. But again, from a receptions as well as yard standpoint, I like him as the best option. If Shakur is out, Dalton Kincaid gets elevated to me to a low end flex tight end. If not, though, I'm leaving him on my bench for the moment. If Shakur is out, I could see Kincaid getting more involved in that passing game. All right. Moving into the last game for the week, we have the Vikings versus Bears. The over-under total for this game is 43.5. Minnesota is 22.5. Chicago is 20.5. Ben Johnson, the Wonderkin, is going to try and work his magic on Caleb Johnson and the Bears. They have a much improved offensive line and a solid defensive unit, with their secondary being really the strongest part of that defense. The Vikings, on the other hand, have one of the worst secondaries, but they have a solid linebacker core and defensive line unit. JJ McCarthy is finally healthy, and he will get his first start. Is Kevin O'Connell the QB whisperer? This will be a face-off between two first-round picks, Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy. With that being said, I am not starting either of these quarterbacks. Both Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy are on the bench until we see what they have in week one, especially in one QB leagues. I've gone through many streamers that I think are better options than these two, so I'm benching them in week one. I am currently conflicted on Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. Right now, if you have the opportunity, I'm saying to bench both of these guys if you're able to, so that we can figure out and really see what happens. But if you were forced to start one, give me Aaron Jones. He's the veteran. He should be the featured back coming into this year. And so, I'd feel much more confident starting Aaron Jones over Jordan Mason. Again, that is if you had to pick. If you can bench them, take advantage of it, start a different running back. Justin Jefferson, obviously a must start. TJ Hawkinson is also a must start tight end. I wasn't high on TJ early in my tight ends episode, but until Addison comes back, TJ will see plenty of valuable targets, especially in PBR. Even with Adam Thielen being traded there, who I will be benching, TJ should be the second receiving option in this offense. So I'm starting TJ Hawkinson. I am benching Colston Loveland. There are, again, a lot of mouths to feed, and is it worth the risk in week one with so many other streaming tight end options who are option 1 or 2 on their offense? I don't think the risk is there. So I'm benching Loveland. I am starting DeAndre Swift. Yes, I know. I'm going to say this again. I am starting DeAndre Swift. He was the most productive and best offensive weapon in 2024 with 1,200 all-purpose yards and a running back 20 finish. He is 26 years old, which is a fantastic fantasy perspective, still on the top end of running back age production. And now he has an upgraded offensive line. He has upgraded play calling, and everybody is fading Swift and saying, oh, we don't know what's going to happen with that backfield. He is their best running back right now. He is their main running back. He's their best pass catching back. So I'm giving him a running back 2 grade flex option for week 1, and I am starting him. Again, DJ Moore and Rhamondre are both starters in week 1. I am valuing DJ Moore as a low-end wide receiver 2 and a Rome as a wide receiver 3/flex option. The Vikings have a bad secondary, and I'm not as high on Caleb Williams, but if Johnson can scheme up solid plays, I could see both of them finding value on the offense. Rome is a dominant red zone weapon. He saw most of the opportunities in 2024. This might change with Loveland in town, but he does bring upside to a game that really should be a dogfight simply because these two teams do hate each other so much. All right, well, that's it. If you like what you heard, give us a like and subscribe. If not, I just appreciate y'all hanging out. And remember, if you have start-sit questions, please ask them, post them in the comments. If you want me to make adjustments or even continue doing this and you find value from it, give us a like. Let us know that so we can keep doing this week in and week out. But until next time, now go steal a championship. Later.